Now, let's get started by learning a little bit more about HTML. What exactly is it, and how do we use it to create websites? Now, no matter what browser you like to use, Chrome or Safari or Brave even, all of these applications do the same thing. They take different files such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and they render them into a website. But even though most modern websites are created using these three different file types combined together, you can't create a website with just a CSS file or just a JavaScript file. However, you can have just an HTML file. And in fact, that's exactly what the first websites were created with, HTML. Now, HTML defines the content and structure of the website. So for example, in this case, all that my HTML file does is it renders a heading that says my website. And when this file is opened by the browser, it will display that heading saying my website. Now, what exactly is HTML? Let's break it down. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. If we look at the first part, hypertext, what does that mean? Well, it refers to pieces of text which can link to other documents in the website. So these pieces of text are hypertext or hyperlinks, and they are the foundation of how an HTML website works. Now, if we take a look at the world's first website created by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who also happens to be the inventor of the internet, then you can see it's filled with these hyperlinks marked in blue. And exactly as you would expect, if you click on any of these hyperlinks, it takes you to another document, another HTML file. So if we go back, you can see that we were on project.html, and if I click on one of the hyperlinks, then it will take me to another HTML file. And this is how hypertext works. And there's even a link on this website explaining exactly what hypertext is. So now that we know what hypertext is, what about the other part, the markup language? What is a markup language? Well, if you look at the English language, we often see little bits that function very similar to markup, like these double quotes. The presence of these quotation marks is what tells a reader that this part is a quotation. And as you'll find, this is going to be really similar. And this whole idea of markup language comes from the days when editors used to review manuscript and mark them up to show certain things, such as, for example, which parts that need to be bold and which parts need to be bold by adding a squiggly line underneath, and which parts need to be italic by underlining it for emphasis. So how do you do markup with HTML? Well, it's done through what's called HTML tags. Now, in the early days of the internet, there were only very few HTML tags. These days, there are thousands of them, but realistically, you're only going to be using some of the important ones, such as headings, H1 through to H6, or the paragraph tag, the P tag. So even though there are many HTML5 tags, once you've narrowed it down to the ones that you actually need to know, then it becomes a lot more approachable. And in the coming lessons, we're going to be covering most of these essential tags. So don't worry too much about memorizing what each of these tags do. We're going to learn about it as we come across them. And we're going to get started right away on the next lesson, learning how to use headings and paragraph tags, some of the OG HTML tags that ever existed. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. All right, so let's talk about the anatomy of an HTML tag and break it down to its component parts so that we can actually understand how they're structured and how we can use them. So we've written HTML elements like so. So here we have the words hello world, and they're enclosed by an opening tag and a closing tag. And in between those tags is the content that we want to apply that structure to. So if you think back to the days of marking down a manuscript, it's exactly the same as putting down a squiggly line underneath certain words or phrases and asking the publisher to make it bolded to affect the structure of certain parts of the text. Now, in this case, the publisher just happens to be our browser. So these tags make requests to the browser, asking it to structure and display our plain text in the way that the web designer wanted it to be shown. Now, the other type of tag that we just saw are tags that don't have a closing tag. They're expressed simply like so. And these are called self-closing tags. And we've seen that with the break tag, and there's a few more others that work like this also. Now, how do we find out if something requires a closing tag or is self-closing? Well, this is where we head to the documentation again. So if we have a look at the documentation for the heading elements, you can see that there's this part in the table that says tag omission, and it says that both the starting and ending tags are mandatory so that you can specify which portion of your text you want to apply this structure to. Now, if we have a look at the BR or the line break element, you can see that under tag omission, it says that it must have a start tag and must not have an end tag. So this is how we find out how we write our tags. Now, while we're here, I want to introduce you to another element called the horizontal rule, or the HR tag. And this will allow us to create these horizontal lines above and below our portion of text. So as you can see in the documentation, under tag omission, it also says that it must not have an end tag. So this is also a self-closing tag. So let's head back over to our pen so that we can add these two horizontal rules above and below our text. So the first one is going to go here. And the last one is going to go here. So you can see that our web page now has two horizontal lines above and below our main portion of text. Now, if we have a closer look at this website, you can see that their horizontal rule is a little bit thicker than ours. So how can we make ours look more like theirs? Now, this is the part where I show you a neat trick. On any web page that you open in Chrome, you can simply right-click on the element that you're interested in and click Inspect in order to look at the HTML and CSS code that's being rendered in the background by the browser. So you can see here, they've got an HR element, horizontal rule, but they've got also all of this going on afterwards. So what exactly is that? Now, we know that the first part of the tag is the HTML element, and it's BR or HR, whatever it is that you want to use. Now, the second part inside the angle bracket or inside our tag is new. And this is called an HTML attribute. And it basically gives more information to the browser to specify modifications to that HTML element. So in this case, we're saying that we want a horizontal rule, but we want it in size 3. Now, what does size 3 mean? And how do we know that we have these HTML attributes available to us? You've guessed it, we're going back to the documentation. Now, I know I'm making a big deal about going to the documentation, but it really is an important skill. Understanding and being able to look up the documentation, being familiar with the structure of it and where to look in order to find out how to implement or do certain things. So if we have a look at our documentation for HR, you can see that there's this section called attributes, and that's what we spoke about just now. The attribute comes after the main HTML element and is separated from the element by a single space. In this case, the horizontal rule element has actually quite a few attributes, including a line, so you can specify whether if you want your horizontal line to align to the left or align to the right or be centered. You can specify the color of the horizontal rule. You can set whether if you want the horizontal rule to have shading or not, and you can also set the height in pixels of that horizontal rule, which is what we saw earlier on over here. So in this case, The reason why their horizontal rule looks different to ours is because ours is by default only 1 pixel high or 1 pixel in size, whereas theirs, if you inspect in the HTML, is 3 pixels in height. And they've also specified no shade, i.e. no shading to the horizontal rule. So if we want to make our website a seamless copy of what we see here, then we also have to specify those attributes. So if you remember, the horizontal rule is a self-closing tag. And so inside the tag, we're going to make a space, and then we're going to specify the name of the attribute, which we know from the documentation to be called the size attribute. And we're going to set it to equal 3 pixels. And then we're going to specify that it is no shade, i.e. no shading. And we know all of this from the documentation. So now, once our code updates, you can see that this brand new horizontal rule looks completely different from what it was before, and we can copy this over to the top as well, so that our horizontal rules look exactly the same as what we've got over here. So now we've seen HTML elements that require an opening tag as well as a closing tag. We've also seen HTML elements that have a self-closing tag. And finally, we've seen that HTML elements can also have an attribute where you can specify modifications to the default element. Now, all we need is just to add one final tag called center to our HTML file, and we would have now faithfully copied what this website looks like. So you can have a look through the HTML by, remember, right-clicking and inspecting in Chrome, and you can look through to see how they've structured the rest of the document as well. Now, this is a good point to mention our first challenge. So we've got this CodePen now where we've been messing around with the HTML. Now you can either save this anonymously or you can create a free account in CodePen in order to be able to access this later on. But I want you to create a brand new pen. And this pen is going to be our code playbook. And you're going to use this document as an interactive notebook, if you will. And I want you to document here all the new things that you've learned as we progress through the course. So, for example, in this and the last lesson, we learn about the H1 tag. So in our code playbook, the first thing that's going to go in is your H1 tag. And you can say that this is a level 1 heading created using the H1 tag. We can go ahead and close it off. And you can look through the documentation to perhaps copy some of these code snippets over, but make sure that whenever you're copying, pasting code, that you understand what the code does. There's nothing worse than copy and pasting code that breaks your website because you didn't understand what you've put in there. So we can go ahead and then modify each of these so that when we're creating our own websites and we want to come back to our playbook and have it as a point of reference, then we'll be able to see easily at a glance all of the elements that we've used and that we've learned about before. So my challenge to you is to create your very own code playbook and to start keeping notes on all the things that you're learning in this course. Now, sometimes with certain elements, for example, the line break, you won't be able to put any text inside the line break in the same way that we've done so for the H1 tag. This is a point where you can use a comment instead in your HTML file. Comments are portions of text which are marked out to be ignored by the browser. And they're usually places where you write notes to yourself or notes to fellow programmers who might be looking at your code. So in HTML, we create a comment by using the angle bracket, a exclamation mark, 2 dashes, and then to close off the comment, we use another 2 dashes and a closing angle bracket. And everything in between here is a comment. You can see that usually it gets highlighted in a different color and none of it gets interpreted into the web page. So this is where you can put sections for your notes. For example, self-closing tags. You can make it into several paragraphs just by putting the closing tag at the bottom. And you can write notes on the elements as we come across them and keep this for your own reference. By the time when you're ready to create your own website, it will be a goldmine of a resource to jog your memory on all of the lessons that you've learned. So in the next lesson, we're going to be building our very first website. And it's going to be really, really awesome because we're going to be using a real text editor and we're going to be putting that website live onto the internet. So there's all of that and more yet to come. So I will see you on the next lesson. Now that we've seen how HTML elements and tags work, it's time to explore the bigger picture, what's called the HTML boilerplate. And this will allow us to understand the structure of our HTML files. Now, just like how there is structure to letters that you would write, for example, there's the section where you have your address, and then you probably would include a dear so-and-so, and then you have the body of your letter, and finally you would write something like yours sincerely, and then your name and signature. Similarly, there is a structure to our HTML files, and it looks something like this. And this is called a boilerplate. It's what you usually start off with when you create any new HTML file. And we're going to go through it line by line so that we understand it. At the top of every HTML file, there should be a doc type declaration, and that's what this tag does. It tells the browser which version of HTML the file was written in. Now, the latest version of HTML is HTML5, and the doc type declaration looks like this, with an angle bracket, an exclamation mark, doc type in all caps, and then HTML. And this line tells any browser that's reading our HTML file that we have written our code in HTML version 5. The next part that we've got is the actual HTML. Now this is going to be the root of the document. It means that everything else, every other element, no matter if it's an H1 or an image or a link, it's all going to go inside the opening and closing tags of the HTML element. And this attribute where it says lang, this is the language of the text content in that element. So for example, if you're writing a website that is going to be targeted at English speakers, then you're going to set your lang to English, EN. Now, this isn't very important for the users who can see your website. It's more important for the users who can't, because there are various screen readers and assistive technologies that will look at this language attribute so that when they read out the website, they can pronounce the words correctly.
Opens profile photo. Follow at YouAngela button.
Now, with the HTML element, we're starting to see the beginnings of a hamburger. There's a bun at the top and there's a bun at the bottom. Now, for those of you guys who have been my long-term friends, you know how much I love food analogies, but this is a great one because when we have an HTML element, usually there is the opening and the closing, and everything that belongs in it is sandwiched inside. Now, the next part of the HTML boilerplate is the head element. And this is an area where important information about our website is placed that is not going to be displayed to the user. So it includes things that will help the website render in the browser correctly, but it doesn't include any sort of content like text or images or anything that the user will see. So one of the things that you should always have in the head section is a meta tag for the character set encoding of the web page. And in this case, it's set as UTF-8. What this does is it ensures that the characters that you're using on your website gets displayed correctly. So for example, in certain character sets, it won't allow emojis to render. In other character sets, they won't have certain symbols like multiplication and division symbols. And that's what this meta tag takes care of. So usually by convention in our HTML boilerplate, we will simply just include this tag as is using the UTF-8 character set, which is one of the most common. So you don't even have to think about it. Now, another thing that you should have in your head section is the title of your website. And that title is usually what gets displayed up here in the tab bar. And in fact, if you right click on any website in Chrome, you can click to view page source, and you can see we've got our doc type, we've got our HTML element inside it, we've got our head, our character set, and then if we scroll a little bit more, you can see we've got our title here. And in between the opening and closing tags of the title, it tells you what title should be displayed up here. So in our case here, the title will simply say my website. Now, there's a lot more things that can go into the head element, as you've seen when we looked at the Google homepage. But for now, these two are the most important things that will always go into your HTML files, and it's important to know. We'll cover other tags as we come across them. Now, the next sandwich inside the sandwich, if you will, are 2 slices of tomatoes. No, just kidding. It's actually the body element. So just like a person, after the head element comes the body element. So inside the body element is where we're going to be spending the majority of our time creating and writing our website. This is where all of the content of the website goes. So the text, the titles, the images, the links, everything that you can do with HTML, creating content and structure, goes in between the opening and the closing tags of the body element. So somewhere inside here. Now, what can go in here? Well, we've seen already how an H1 works. So we can put in a heading, we can add images, we can add lots of things. And this is essentially where the meat of our website is going to live. So once our burger collapses down, you can see that this is what a typical website's HTML code is made up of. So no matter what you add into your body, you can vary it up, but by default, most websites will start off with a boilerplate that looks like this. When you're starting out, I often recommend students to type this out when they're creating new websites. And in fact, you can have a go doing this now by going into VS Code, typing out these elements, and creating your website entirely from scratch. Now, we're beginning to see this idea of nesting in an HTML document. And this is going to be a concept that's going to become super important as we learn more and more programming. But it's simple to understand if we come back to this analogy of the hamburger. So we have our HTML element, which has the opening and closing tags here, and it is exactly like our hamburger bun. So this is our top bun, and this is our bottom bun. And sandwiched in between is everything that goes inside the HTML element. Now, if we take a look at our body element, then you can see here we've got the opening body tag, which will represent with a slice of tomato, and the closing body tag. And in between those 2 slices of tomato is the content for our website. Now, you'll notice that some of the HTML tags, even though they have an opening and closing tag, they're not on different lines. And that's because if we can fit it on one line and we can see the beginning and the end very easily, then we don't actually need to create several lines. But nonetheless, it's still got a beginning and an end. Now, the important thing for us when we're writing code and we've got all of this sandwiching going on, that we indent our code properly so that you can see that this clearly lines up with the opening tag here, so they are clearly sandwiching something in between. And then we have 2 spaces and we've got the next indentation level here. So this one lines up with the closing tag. And through this kind of indentation, you can quite easily visualize that this head section is clearly embedded inside the HTML section. So just like our lettuce is inside our hamburger, by indenting our code properly, we'll be able to keep our code tidy and we'll be able to see at a glance exactly what our code looks like. Now, finally, because we're using VS Code, I want to tell you about a shortcut that means you don't have to type out this boilerplate every single time. Once you've typed it out once or twice and you know exactly how this boilerplate looks, you can save a lot of time by simply typing !, hitting enter on the first selection, and then it will automatically insert all of that code for you, saving you a lot of time, especially when you're creating many HTML documents. Now, the important thing here, though, is this only works if you have created a .html website. So notice that when you create a new file inside VS Code, if you name it and save it as something.html, then this trick will work. If you save it with another extension, then it won't. Now, there's a couple of things here that we haven't seen before, a couple more meta tags, and there's a lot of other meta tags. But here we've got one line here which says HTTP equivalent XUA compatible content, i.e. Edge. This basically just keeps our code compatible with Internet Explorer. And in fact, I normally don't write this line anymore because Internet Explorer has been deprecated and is no longer in use. So if you want to keep your code clean, you can actually delete this from your VS Code auto-generated boilerplate. Now, the next one tells you the viewport, and it defines how the website should be displayed relative to the screen that it's being rendered on. And this line of code just tells the browser how to display your website when it first opens. So now that we've learned all about HTML boilerplates, it's time to build your own boilerplate, or in this case, build your own burger. As you notice, there are endless numbers of HTML elements, and we're going to be creating our own HTML elements. But the important thing here I want you to understand is how nesting works in HTML and how you can keep your code tidy by using good indentation and keeping good programming practices. So if we're building our own imaginary burger, let's imagine the world's best burger. You can have it vegan, you can have it vegetarian, you can have bacon, you can have whatever it is your heart desires, but you have to write it in HTML code. So let's begin by creating a bun. So I've got a bun element that I've created, which has an opening and a closing tag. And I've added an attribute. You can add as many of these attributes as you like. And remember, we add attributes by giving it a name, and then after an equal sign, we give it a value. Now, the next part is for you to invent. So head over to VS Code and build your own burger, adding in whatever elements you want. Add tomatoes, add ham, but make sure that you're keeping the indentation correct and that you're working with this idea of opening and closing tags. But you can be as creative as you like. Be sure to share your code for your burger in the Q&A section. And if you want some inspiration, this is one that I made earlier. But I want you to practice making your own and doing it your way. Have a go at that, and once you're done, head over to the next lesson. Now, in the coming lessons, we're going to be building our personal website. So to get started, go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code, and we're going to go into File, and we're going to open a folder. Now, somewhere on your computer, go ahead and create a new folder called Web Development. And inside this folder, we're going to create a folder for our current project, which is going to be called HTML Personal Site. Go ahead and hit Create, and then we're going to open up this folder in VS Code. Now here, we're going to create our very first file, our index.html file, which is where we're going to write our website. And to begin, we're going to use that shortcut to create our HTML boilerplate. And I'm going to delete pretty much everything in here. And you can go ahead and change this title to anything you want. And you can even add emojis into your title by Googling for it and copying and pasting it in. Now, in order to see this in our browser, we can right-click on the file and go ahead and click Copy Path. Now, once we've gotten hold of that path, we can paste it into the search bar here in its entirety, and it will load up our website. Now, there's nothing in our website at the moment other than if you look up here, you'll see our title show up. Now, in the coming videos, you might see me use the Atom code editor instead of VS Code. And that's because previously in the course, we used Atom as the code editor. But as of December 2022, Atom is going to be sunsetted and no longer maintained. So that's why we're switching to the most popular code editor at the moment, which is VS Code. So if you see me mention Atom or you see the Atom code editor on screen, don't worry, everything will work exactly the same. Just continue using VS Code.
So now that we understand how the HTML boilerplate works and what each line does in it, it's time to move into the body section and start giving our website some content. Because at the moment, our website is looking a little bit plain.
So if we take a look at a typical personal website, here of computer science lecturer John Kleinberg,
the first thing that we want right at the top here is a level 1 heading that says our name. So let's head back into Atom. And as a challenge to you, add a level 1 heading inside the body section of your website that contains your name. So this one's easy, and it's made even easier using the autocomplete features inside Atom. All I have to write in order to create an H1 tag, which is what's needed to create a level 1 heading, is I just have to write H1, and it makes a suggestion asking me, are you looking for heading level 1? And now if I hit enter or if I hit tab, I get the H1 tag inserted automatically, opened and closed for me. And my cursor gets moved right in between exactly the place where I would need to start typing. So now if I hit save and I head back over to my personal site, and remember, if you close down this tab, you can always go into your Finder or your Explorer to open it back up again, or you can select the full file path from Atom as well and paste it into here. Now, if I hit enter, you can see my H1, my level 1 heading gets shown up here, just like John Kleinberg's, and we're ready to move on to the next thing. Now, we want to have a line that shows our title, so who it is that we are. So let's head back to Atom. And firstly, I'm going to get rid of this little heart because it doesn't look very professional. And I'm going to add another HTML element under the H1. And this is a good point to talk about how to keep your HTML file neat and tidy. Now, most programmers are very serious about how to indent and structure their HTML files. And the reason for it is because having these indents makes it easy for us to see at a glance which tags are inside other ones. So for example, if we look at the top level here, we've got the HTML tag. And because both the head and the body tags are indented inside these HTML tags, it shows us at a glance that the head is inside the HTML element, and as is the body. But the body and the head, they're at the same hierarchical level. They're not inside of each other at all. And this is a good structure for us to be able to see at a glance what's happening in our code. And also when other programmers look at our code, because we're used to working with the same structure, it's easy to be able to understand what's going on at a glance. So you can see that there's one part of our code that breaks this rule, and that's this line here. Our H1 is contained inside our body element, and so it should be indented like so. And you can clearly see that this is now a child or contained inside the body tag. Now, if you didn't want to do that manually every single time, well, we actually installed a package right at the beginning that helps us with this organization. It's our little housekeeper, if you will. So if you go to Packages and go to Atom Beautify and click on Beautify, it will automatically beautify your entire code file to make all of the indents for you and to make everything look neat and tidy. So every so often, once your code starts getting messy, either learn the shortcut or go through it in the menu and reorganize your code file. It'll make it much easier on the eyes and much easier to read. So now I want to add my title under my H1 tag. And for this, I'm going to use the P tag, which is a paragraph tag. And the p tag formats text into a paragraph. So they get a new line and the text inside gets grouped together into the same paragraph. So let's add my title here. And now let's see what our changes look like. So remember again, Command S or Control S to save, and head back over to our site and Command R or Control R to refresh, or click this button to refresh. And there we go. There's our brand new paragraph showing up. Now, if we look at John Kleinberg's, you can see that his title is italicized and ours is not. So how can we make ours italicized as well? Well, this is where our lessons on documentation is going to come in handy. Let's go ahead and go to Google and see if you can find out how to italicize your text using HTML. So let's write italicize HTML MDN and let's hit enter. And you can see that there's actually two tags that come up here. And the first one that comes up is this one. So let's have a look at it first. Now this is the EM or the emphasis element, and it marks text that has a stress emphasis. Now it looks like this in practice, and the result is that it makes it look italicized. Now you might have noticed back here, we also had the I element or the I tag, and it does the same thing visually. It also makes the text that's in between the I tags italicized. But there's a little bit of a difference here, and the difference is quite subtle. The emphasis tag tells the browser the words that are enclosed between it should be stressed or should be emphasized, but the I tag only italicizes the text, so it only styles the text to make it slanted, and it doesn't confer any of that emphasis. And for this reason, it's good practice to always use emphasis instead of italic, because it conveys more information and it isn't just about the style. Remember, when we're writing HTML code, we're more concerned about structuring our text rather than caring about how it looks or how it appears. Now, a similar pair is the B tag or the bold tag, and this is equivalent to the I tag. It makes any text that's in between bolded, like so. But instead, what you should be using is the strong tag. And that's because the strong tag, again, confers meaning. It says that this text has strong importance, and therefore it's displayed in bold, rather than merely saying that this should be styled so that it's darker than the rest of the text. And if you're interested, you can have a read between bold and strong, as well as emphasis is strong, as well as emphasis in italic. It makes for some interesting reading and gives you a bit more background information on the difference between these two tags. But whenever you're looking to make something bold in your website, you should probably be using the strong tag. And whenever you want to make something italicized, you should be using the emphasis tag. So let's go ahead and make our paragraph, this title, italicized or emphasized like so. So if you remember, all we have to do is just to enclose it inside the EM tag. Now you can do that for the entire length of the text, or you can simply apply it to just a section of the text. So for example, if I wanted to make the part where it says the app brewery bolded, then I can simply add a strong tag and have the app brewery, not including the full stop, inside this strong tag. Now if I hit save and go ahead and refresh, then you can see that the entire paragraph is emphasized and the app brewery is bolded. So we've done a little bit of formatting for our website. Now let's move on to the next part. We're going to add a little bio here, and that again is going to be inside a paragraph element, and it just tells anybody who's visiting our personal site who we are and what we're all about. So once you're ready, go ahead and figure out where you should add this and complete the challenge. Okay, so that wasn't so hard. All we have to do is just to indent so we're in the right position. We're inside the body tag, and we're going to create a new paragraph element. So this is going to be on a new line from this paragraph. They're going to be separate paragraphs. And here I'm going to write, I am an iOS and web developer. I love coffee and brew my own beers. Let's save and check it out here. All right, looks pretty good. And we're getting pretty far already. So obviously you can put as much or as little as you want here and design your website however you want it to look. Now, the next thing I want to add is this horizontal line. And we've done that previously. So you can go ahead and add that into your code file as a challenge. All right, so do you remember how to do that? Well, all we need to do is we're still staying inside the body because we're creating the content for our website. And all we need to do is just to create a horizontal rule. So I'm going to use my good friend AutoSuggest, and I'm going to write HR and hit enter to insert a new horizontal rule. And now it's looking pretty similar to what we've got here. Now, the last thing I want to add is a subtitle where I'm going to list all the books and courses that I'm teaching. So go ahead and add a level 3 heading to your website underneath the horizontal rule and call it books and teaching. Or if you don't have any books and teaching, you can simply call it education and list all the schools that you've attended. So underneath the horizontal rule, I'm going to add an H3, so a level 3 heading, and this is going to be the books and teaching. All right, so we've already got most of our personal site coded up. In the next lesson, we're going to be diving into HTML lists and how we can create these bullet points as well as numbered points and add it to our website. So all of that and more, I will see you on the next lesson. All right, so in the last lesson, we created the start of our beautiful personal website, and we're modeling off John Kleinberg's homepage. So the next step that we want to achieve is this. How do we put in a bullet list into our website so that we can list maybe the books and courses that we're teaching, in my case, or it could be your education background, which schools you attended, what degrees you attained, what courses you've completed, etc. So that's the next challenge. If you want, you can pause the video here and try to work it out yourself using MDN and Google search. Alternatively, you can follow along with me and we're going to go through the same process. So we're looking for a bullet list, maybe, and it's going to be in HTML. That's the language we want to write it in. And I'm going to use MDN as my documentation source. So if you hit enter, you can see that the first one that comes up is the UL element, and that's exactly what we want. UL stands for unordered list. So essentially a bullet point list. Now, ordered list would be something that has, A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. But in our case, this is exactly what we want. And you can see that this is a simple example which will render like so, where the UL tag encloses all the parts that will be included in the bullet list, and the LI tag, or the list item tag, encloses each and every bullet point. Alternatively, you have a slightly more complex, more nested unordered list, and that looks more like this. So let's go ahead and add this to our code. So we've got this H3. That is the subtitle for the books and courses that we're teaching. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new UL, unordered list, and a new list item. And I'll add something like the complete iOS app development bootcamp. And then I'll go ahead and add another one, the complete And if we again hit save and check it out, you can see that they are there as an unordered list or as bullet points. All right, cool. So the next thing that I want to add is outside of the unordered list, I'm going to add another H3, and this is going to have the subtitle of, let's say, my hobbies. And here I want to have an ordered list that's 1, 2, 3, and it's going to list some of my hobbies. So can you try and use MDN as well as search to figure out how to do that and then list your hobbies in that ordered list. All right, so let's walk through it together. If we have a look at unordered list, if you scroll to the bottom, there's usually a part where it says see also on MDN, and this tells you the related HTML elements, which are list items and the ordered list, the OL. So let's click on that and we can see how this works. This is a simple example of an ordered list, and you've got the first, second, and third item as list items. So the format is exactly the same as the unordered or the bullet list, apart from the fact that this time replacing UL with OL. And similarly, you can nest these lists. You can nest a ordered list inside an unordered list, and also vice versa. And there's a whole bunch of modifications that you can have with your ordered list, for example, using Roman numerals instead of using numbers. And let's go ahead and put it into practice on our website. So I'm going to list a whole bunch of hobbies under a ordered list. And the first list item is going to be, let's say, beer brewing. And the next one will be martial arts. And the last one can be motorcycles. There we go. Cool. So those are my hobbies, and they're included under an ordered list inside list items. And if we go ahead and hit save and then hit refresh, you can see that we've got our ordered list and our unordered list inside our homepage. All right, cool. So this lesson was all about HTML lists. If you're interested, you can have a look at some of these other types of lists, such as the ordered lists which start at a particular number, or the lists that use Roman numerals, and you can mess around with that code inside your playbook or inside your website. In the next lesson, we're going to be covering the image element, and we're going to be brightening up our website with some pictures. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. All right, so in the last lesson, we looked at how to use HTML lists that were ordered as well as unordered. In this lesson, I want to talk about the image element and how we can incorporate images into our website. So the image tag is, again, a self-closing tag, so it doesn't need to be closed. But for the image element, just providing an image tag isn't enough. You also need to specify the source, and that's the source of the image that will be displayed. That can either be a URL, so it can fetch it from the internet, or it can be a local image that's included in the same directory as your website. So we're going to look at both types. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for an image of myself online, and let's have a look to see if there's any images that are actually me. Oh, there we go. So I already found one. So this comes from my Twitter, and you can also probably go to your own Twitter or your Facebook, and you can right click on the image and simply copy the image address. Now, if I paste it here, you can see the whole URL of where that image is located. And if I hit enter, my browser will fetch that image from that location. Now, if I copy this image address or image source and I add it to my website as a HTML element, so just above my H1, so just above my name here, I want my image to show up. So I'm going to use the image tag, and the source, I'm just going to paste in that URL that I got from earlier on. Now, the next attribute here that comes up automatically is the alt, or the alternative text. And this is a case for, say, if a browser can't render the image, then it will simply display an alternative text to the user to describe what that image was about. So I'll just put the alt text as Angela profile picture. Now, if you're interested in search engine optimization and getting your website ranking for certain keywords, this is something that Google looks at to try and figure out what your web page is about. So if you're making a web page that's about burrito recipes and you add an alt text that says finished burrito product image 1, then it helps Google to index and figure out that maybe your web page is related when somebody is searching for burrito recipes. All right, so let's hit save and let's refresh and check it out. And I've now incorporated my first image onto my personal website. So you can either look around for an image of yourself on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere that would host it. Alternatively, if you can't find any images of yourself on the web, which is probably a good thing, you can also create an account on Photobucket and upload your own picture in order to get a URL. And after you do so, you can simply click on the image and right-click to copy the image address and paste it into your source between the quotation marks. It will work exactly the same. There we go. Angela is now a box of biscuits. Great. Now, when my browser looks through this file to see how it should load it up and display it, when it comes across this image tag, it has to go and ping the servers of Twitter to try and obtain this image. And if it gets permission to download this image, then it will grab that image and display it over here. So currently, my image is hosted on Twitter's servers, and my browser has to download it from there in order to display it inside my web page. Now, what if Twitter goes down? What if they die? What if nobody wants to send tweets anymore? Well, then their server is going to be shut down, and my image will no longer be available for download, and you will instead end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And you might have come across it in the past when you've been loading up websites. It means that the image is no longer available or is no longer hosted at the address that's specified in the source. So in order to remove our reliance on Twitter, we can also put an image into our folder HTML personal site and refer to it inside our source. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, if I go onto my desktop inside web development, inside the folder HTML personal site, I can drag and drop or paste an image of me into this folder. And now my index.html and my picture called angela.png is in the same folder, and I can refer to it inside my code. So instead of using a web address as the source of my image, I can simply refer to the file name because they are at the same level. So index.html and angela.png are at the same hierarchical level. They're both inside my site. Now, if I had an images folder and I put my image into there, then I would have to add a path to get there. So it would be something like this. Both ways work, and you can do it either way you like. And now if you hit save and you go to my site, you'll notice this image change from square, which is what it got from Twitter, to circular, which is what it got from my local file. Now, in my case, I'd cropped my image to a circle using Photoshop. But if you wanted to create your own circular image, you can use a tool like crop-circle.imageonline.co. And here you'll be able to upload an image and crop the part of the image that you're interested and get it as a circle and be able to download it to use it in your website. And there we go. We've managed to brighten up our homepage by adding an image of ourselves to the top of it using the image tag, and we've started to look at these HTML attributes. And you can see that every single HTML element in the MDN reference also has a section on attributes. And we're really only touching the surface here because there's other attributes that you can add to the image element or most other elements that you decide to use. And we're going to be looking at these attributes as we come across them for different HTML elements. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at anchor tags and how we can start adding links into our website and how we can create new pages that can be linked to from our homepage. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. Now, if we compare our current site against John Kleinberg's. The only major difference that you will see now is that his has a whole bunch of hyperlinks interspersed in the homepage, whereas ours is completely devoid of any hyperlinks. If we think back to what HTML stands for, we've talked about the markup language part already, but we haven't yet talked about the hypertext part of HTML. So hypertext is basically just a bunch of text documents that can be linked together using these hyperlinks. So when you click on one of them, it takes you to a different text document, and then you click on a link there and it takes you to another different text document. And that's where the HT part of HTML comes from. And in fact, if you're interested, there is even a game called the Wiki Game, where you have a starting Wikipedia article and a goal Wikipedia article, and you have to click through the links on Wikipedia to try and navigate to the goal article. And it's basically an association game that's played using hyperlinks. Now, what are these links made of? If you have a look at each and every one of these links, if you right-click on it and click Inspect, you know that you can bring up the Google Chrome developer tools. And if we have a look, you can see that it's actually pointing towards a tag with a hyperlink reference to the destination that this link is going to take you to. And before the A tag gets closed, that's the link text. So in this case, it's the word computer science that gets underlined, and when you click on it, it takes you to cs.cornell.edu. Let's go ahead and implement this for our website. So there's many places where maybe you'd want to direct people away. So maybe I can link them to the App Brewery's website here. Or I could show them examples of me brewing beer or me riding motorcycles. Let's go ahead and try that in code. So the first place that I want to add a link to is this part where it says the App Brewery. So I'm going to put an A tag or an anchor tag just in front and close the A tag just behind. And if you want to have a look at the structure of the anchor tag, then as you remember, you can always go to the MDN web docs and you can read all about the anchor element and all of its attributes. Now, the main attribute that we're going to be concerned with is the href, and this is a URL that the hyperlink is going to point to, or the destination of that hyperlink. In my case, the destination is going to be appbrewery.co, and if I just copy that, then I can head over here and add an A tag or an anchor tag just before where it says the App Brewery, and this is what the autofill is going to write for me. So let's have a look at the structure in a bit more detail. As with the other HTML elements we've seen, the anchor tag has the A as the element name, and then the most important attribute that you're going to find yourself using is the href, and this is set to equal the link destination. So where are you going to take your user when they click on this link? And the anchor tag is not a self-closing tag, so it has a closing tag at the end. And between the open tag and the closing tag is our link text. So that's the bit of text that's going to be underlined and highlighted in blue so that the user knows that when they click on this word, this is going to take them to that link. So in our case, our href is going to be this URL. And between the open anchor tag and the closing anchor tag, we're going to put the link text, so the bit of text that's going to be underlined. And in my case, I'm just going to cut this phrase here and put it inside the anchor tag. So now you can see there's actually two sets of HTML elements that enclose this line of text. It is simultaneously going to be strong, i.e. bolded, and it's also going to act as a link to the appbrewery.co website. So if we hit save and let's go back over here and hit refresh, you can see that this has now been underlined and it's highlighted in a different color. Now, by convention, the highlight is going to be blue if it's a link that we've never clicked on, and it's going to be purple if we have clicked on it in the past. And just to confirm, if we click on it, it takes us to appbrewery.co. Brilliant. So that's working as expected. Now, why don't you go ahead and add some links to your hobbies? So, you know how they say in interviews you should always prove that you've done what you say you've done? Go ahead and add some links, maybe to images on the internet or to YouTube videos, anything that you like. And it doesn't have to be in your hobbies. It could be in your books and teaching or education or any part of your website, basically. So go ahead and pause the video and add some more links. So adding links to the ordered list or the unordered list is exactly the same as what we've done up here. So I'm going to go ahead and add an anchor tag to beer brewing. So I'm going to hit enter to create my anchor tag. I'm going to put the words beer brewing in between my anchor tag so that will act as the link text. And my href is going to be a YouTube video that I've got where I show people my beer brewing. So let's go ahead and copy that and paste it into here. And then I'm going to add another anchor tag here just to fill up the motorcycle part. All right, so now I've added two links, one for beer brewing and one for the word motorcycles, both inside my ordered list. So if we hit save and we hit refresh, then you'll see we've now got two links and they're blue because we've never clicked on it before. So if I hold down the command button on my keyboard or control on Windows and click on each of these links, then they'll open up in new tabs and we can have a look at my evidence that I have indeed done some beer brewing or motorcycling. Now that we've seen how to create some anchor tags that point to links on the internet, what if I wanted to create a separate page for the My Hobbies section, and I wanted to create a link that linked to my own page? Let's head back into Atom, and inside this HTML personal site folder where we've got our index.html, so this file, I'm going to right click and I'm going to click New File. And the new file is going to be called hobbies.html. And it's going to be created inside the same folder as index. So you can see they're at the same hierarchical level. Now for hobbies HTML, I'm first going to add the HTML boilerplate code. And the title is going to be My Hobbies. In the body, I'm just going to copy all of this and I'm going to hit Command X or Control X to cut. And then I'm going to paste it over here. So now if I hit save for hobbies and I go back to the index.html and I create a new anchor tag and it's going to have the link text of my hobbies. And the href is going to be the file name. So in this case, it will be hobbies.html. Now, if I hit save and I go back to my website, hit refresh, that ordered list has disappeared and is now replaced by this hyperlink. And if I click on it, it takes me to this brand new page that I've created called My Hobbies. So now you can see how you can really easily start to create multiple pages of your website. And as long as you've got it inside the same folder, or you can specify a path for the browser to get to it, then you can start linking up your homepage with all of these different satellite pages, and you start to build up a website rather than just a web page. As a challenge, I want you to create another page that is going to contain your contact details. So how do you get in touch? So say if somebody came across your personal site and they wanted to hire you or they wanted to message you. Now, it's probably quite cluttering to have it on the home page. So we want to create another link down here that says contact me. And it's going to link to another page just like My Hobbies, but it's going to contain maybe your address, maybe your email, maybe your telephone, whatever you're comfortable with giving to the internet. Go ahead, pause the video and give it a go. All right, so it's going to be exactly the same as what we did for my hobbies. So we're going to go to our HTML personal site folder. We're going to right click on it. We're going to create a new file, and this is going to be called contactme.html. And here we're going to again start with the HTML boilerplate, and the title is going to be Contact Me. And in the body, we're going to have an H1, that's my contact details. And then below that, maybe a paragraph, that's going to be my fictional address. And maybe another one, that's going to be some fictional number, telephone number to contact me with. And then it will be my email at gmail.com. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit save. Go back to index.html and add another anchor tag where we link to this page called contact-me.html. And the link text will just be contact me. And we're going to hit save and refresh. And now we can click on here to this brand new page. All right, so today's lesson was all about the anchor tag, and be sure to check out the anchor tag reference on MDN Web Docs. And there's a whole bunch of other attributes that you can read about, and there's really good examples that can show you some of the other functionality that you can have by simply including the anchor tag. So that's all from me for today. I will see you on the next lesson. Well done for completing the first module. You've already come so far just by taking the first step. Because you know that most people who buy online courses, they never get started. So you're already one step closer to your goal. But we all know that at some point later on, things will get more difficult. It will get more challenging. I can promise you this already. So how can you keep this current level of motivation that you have and be able to carry it through to the difficult times? One of the things that I find really helpful is setting goals and having my goals around me, like displayed on the wall while I'm working or while I'm studying. So I've created this fantastic worksheet for you so that you can start thinking about why you're doing this. Why are you learning to code? Why are you learning this skill? What will you be able to achieve once you've mastered it? And what would your life look like once that happens? So head over to the next lesson, fill out the sheet with your answers, and then print it out and put it somewhere where you can see it. So that when things become difficult and when your motivation takes a nosedive, you can have a look at it and remind yourself of why you're doing it in the first place. So head over there now.